Hey, my friends, I'm so happy to have you on my podcast today because I have a very special person here, Karen Olson. She is the founder of Family Promise. She has a very special journey that took her to where she is now and a book that she is publishing called Meant for More. So, welcome, Karen. I'm so thankful that you're here.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So, I have done some research and it seems that part of your journey started with a sandwich.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
true.
Would you like to tell us?
A ham and cheese sandwich and an orange juice.
And an orange juice. Can you tell us about
Mhm.
that?
Yes, well, I was a marketing manager for the Warner Lambert Company, and I would go into the city quite often for meetings. And, it became difficult to walk a city block without seeing somebody who was obviously homeless. It's typically people suffering from chronic homelessness, individuals, lying on a subway grate, rummaging through a trash can for something to eat. And I would never really let my eyes fall on them. I would avert my eyes, I guess because I thought if I saw them, maybe I would want to do something to help. I'm not sure what the rationale was. But this one particular day in 1981, November, I was about to pass a homeless woman who I'd seen before. She sat on a crate outside of Grand Central Station. She was in her late 70s, I would guess. And she always looked down. Her head was always bowed to the street as if she was, so depressed. And I had known depression. And so this one particular day, just on impulse, I ran across the street and got her a sandwich, a ham and cheese, and an orange juice. And when I came back, I handed it to her, and she said, "Thank you. God bless you. I haven't eaten anything since yesterday." Well, I was struck by that, and I stayed there a bit, and we talked. I learned a little bit about her life. She had been married, her husband passed away. She ended up in a single room occupancy hotel, which was remodeled for condominiums. And so she was out in the street. Sometimes she would stay at the women's shelter. But she asked me about my life too, which I thought was very touching. I told her I had two sons and what I did for a job. And at one point, she reached up and she touched my hand, and um, she more than touched my hand. She took my hand in hers. And at that point, I felt like I crossed an invisible line because I would never stop and go near homeless people. Maybe it's because way back when my grandmother, who lived in New York City, when I wanted to reach out and help, she'd say, people like that want to be that way. Sometimes they even have thousands of dollars tucked in their bag and you don't want to go near them. And so she tugged at my hand. And so my childlike compassion turned to fear and then repulsion. So it became very easy for me to pass by people who were suffering from homelessness. And well, then I went home and I told my two sons, excuse me, Brad and Doug, about Millie. And they said, let's go find more people like Millie and bring them sandwiches.
Hmm. Um, I have to say, I'm a high school English teacher. I don't know if you know that. So I know that part of your journey has been helping with literacy, and not, not just the homeless part, but helping them with literacy and finding homes and finding jobs. So I find that really touching because I think in my area, I live in Vermont, next to the Canadian border, and we have a lot of poverty up here. And I know that like the kids that come to my school, we now feed them breakfast and snack and lunch.
So important.
Bring like let them go home with food. I have a drawer that's full of like healthy snacks because they just don't have that security at home. So I really have a passion for what you went through.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And later I learned about homeless families. But I told Brad and Doug, about Millie. So we went in to Port Authority bus terminal. That's where we saw quite a few homeless people gather. In fact, anybody sitting on a bench was not waiting for their bus. They were simply homeless. And we brought the sandwich, and the sandwiches became a vehicle to say we cared. And those men and women sitting on benches um, had names, and we learned their names. And there was Lucille who lived under an escalator. She was in her 70s, and she was always dressed to the hilt, but homeless, and probably vestiges of her past. And she would tell Doug, now Doug, she claimed she had been a first grade teacher. She would say to Doug, now Doug, you study hard because you don't want to end up here homeless like me. And so we got to know these people. We got to know Arthur, who was a World War II veteran. So when Thanksgiving came around, I decided I wanted to invite some of our friends back to my house for Thanksgiving dinner. And so 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, I got bus tickets and put them in an envelope with an invitation and handed them out to our friends. So we had eight people come to our house for Thanksgiving dinner. Now, the thing about that is, one, I'm not a good cook. And two, yeah, but it gets worse. Two, I've never even cooked a Thanksgiving dinner ever. So, but I had the right spirit. And fortunately, my neighbors helped and cooked the turkey and the side dishes. But um, then we drove to the bus stop in my town and picked up our friends from Port Authority. And they came in to my house. It was something my neighbor later commented, Karen, what was that all about? Who were these people? Um, coming into the house, but it's one of the best Thanksgivings I've ever had, you know. You can't put on airs or have small talk. These are people who have been hurting, and it was just wonderful to sit around the table and they would discuss Thanksgivings past. So we did this for a couple of years. And then at Christmas time, I would have two Christmases, one at my house, and my former husband would come, and we would have tons of presents for our two boys. And then I'd be on my way to Connecticut to see my father and sister, and there'd be more presents. But in between, we would stop at Port Authority and give out the wrapped gifts. We bought new gloves and wallets and scarves and things, big hugs, thank you, God bless you, and Merry Christmas. So this all became very normal for me. And I was less and less interested in my job at Warner Lambert. I mean, I was always good at it, and, creating sweepstakes and couponing events for products like Schick razors and Listerman mouthwash. But it was a far cry from offering comfort to those in need. And so I was less and less interested. And at the same time, I wanted to find out what was going on in my home state of New Jersey. And I started volunteering in Elizabeth, New Jersey, at a soup kitchen and a shelter. And I learned at that time that families were the fastest growing segment of the homeless population. And the number one reason the kids were taken from their parents and placed in foster care was not abuse or neglect, it was simply homelessness. And I got to talk to some of these families, talked about living in their cars and afraid that if the authorities stopped by their car and saw the children were living in the car, they would take the children away. So there was a lot of fear. So I then planned a conference on family homelessness because I wanted to invite the religious community, because certainly no matter what the faith, all religions have a mandate to serve those in need. Um, excuse me. So I went everywhere to various congregations and had flyers about the conference. And really worked hard. I really felt that that was going to be the key because I could have invited anybody, but for me, it was important to invite the religious community. Also, because growing up, the church I belonged to, there was no outreach or benevolence beyond the walls of the church. Um, so 200 people came onto an all-day conference on family homelessness. And that really proved to me as they walked in the door and the numbers were growing, that compassion is alive and well. After the conference, I began meeting with folks and we talked about finding a building for shelter. But we couldn't find the building. There was a lot of NIMBYism and zoning issues. And not one church or synagogue could be a full-time shelter. And so it was very, very frustrating. So then I had an idea. I said, how about we all take turns? And so 11 churches and one synagogue came forward and agreed to provide not just shelter, but hospitality in their buildings for a week at a time on rotation with the others. So that meant any one religious congregation would do this about once a quarter.
Mhm.
And that worked out very well. At first, it was apprehension in the community. But the families came in, they talked about good food, they talked about how they were happy in the rooms we set aside for them. But most of all, they talked about the volunteers. They said, never met so many caring people in my whole life. They treated us like family. And that's been kind of throughout. Well, fast forward, other communities in New Jersey said, how do you start this? I shared it with them. And then people from Columbus, Ohio, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania said, can you help us? And yes, I did. And they developed their own program. But then I decided, compassion is alive and well, and people want to help. And certainly there's a need everywhere. So I developed some materials and videos and I went out and spoke with clergy and developed many more programs. And then I hired a staff and trained them in, how to start the program. Or actually, volunteers who were involved in the program, they became our ambassadors in new communities to tell them how to start it. So it all grew. And today we have 200 affiliates across the country. And we've helped close to 1 million men, women, and children. And today, yeah, 81% of the families find housing. And so it's really interesting because I never consider myself a leader. I just wanted to help. So I
Mhm.
gave that sandwich to Millie. And then one thing led to another. And I found that my passion drove me all the way through to help create this.
That's an amazing story. It's amazing what compassion and passion can do and help millions of people. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, the passion about helping people was the real driver. If I didn't have that passion, I don't think I
Mhm.
could do it. We might say that's true for a lot of things. If you have the passion, that will enable you to realize what you want to do, but you have to be passionate. And I was passionate about it. But you also have to have a plan. And so I
Mhm.
had to plan the program. And then, I faced a lot of opposition and from some local congregations and even other agencies who were concerned that we would take their volunteers or their funding. So you have to be persistent as well. And
Mhm.
I certainly was because I had the passion to do what I was doing.
Yeah, definitely. And did your boys help you right along with all of that? I mean, they're the
Mhm.
ones that kind of pushed you into this in a way. So,
Yes, they did. They're very proud of what was developing, and yeah, they did, and they were involved with Family Promise as volunteers. So
mhm.
yeah, they were always very supportive.
Mm.
Although one time I can remember I was sitting on my dining room table, that was my desk when I first started the organization. And I was on the phone and then Brad walked by and he said, I hate homelessness. And I said, I hate it too. That's not what he meant because I was so focused on building the organization that maybe I needed to provide them more attention.
Mhm.
But they grew up very well and they're very charitable themselves.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And you have just written a book, Meant for More. Could you tell me more about that?
Yes, yeah, meant for more, following your heart and finding your purpose. It's
Yeah.
based, well, it's part memoir, but it's also stories of other volunteers and guests and Family Promise. And what it's about is when you open your heart and go beyond yourself, happiness can just catch up with you. We sometimes rely too much on short fixes, the new designer handbag, the luxurious vacation, the new snazzy car, but that happiness is short-lived. When you
Mhm.
reach out beyond yourself, it's ongoing. And it doesn't have to be volunteering at an organization. It can be just being kind to your own family members or leaving a generous tip for your waitress, that sort of thing. But it's a sense of going beyond yourself that I think, and I have heard from so many people that it brings real happiness.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I've definitely found that in my life and the women that I work with is that when you give back to others, that's where the real happiness and
Hmm.
like self happiness comes from.
Yes,
Yeah. And so this is stories of people that you have worked with throughout the years.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah,
Oh, I love that. Nice.
different stories.
Yeah.
Then after spreading the program all over the country, I decided to retire in January of 2016. And I traveled a little bit, spent more time at home, was enjoying my retirement. And I went to Miami Beach, where I had a small condo. And on February 12th, 2019, I was sitting beside the pool waiting for my cryotherapy appointment. I don't know, do you know what cryotherapy is?
I do, but I would love for you to explain it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
It's super cold
Yeah.
therapy and you go in this chamber and it's really very, very, very cold. And you can take it for 3 minutes and then you step out and it brings both physical and mental health benefits. And I had done it in New Jersey where I live and I also in Miami, but this one about 30 times. This one day, the reception at the desk said, have a new attendant. She's new. She's been well trained. Well, I got in the chamber and it was bitter cold. I mean, beyond anything. I don't really recall saying this, but I said, I'm cold, I'm cold, I'm so cold. So she ran around and opened the door, but she opened the door and she was behind the door. So she couldn't help me out. Not only that, I was frozen. I couldn't walk. And so I fell out like a popsicle and hit my head on the floor and really recognized right away. Couldn't feel anything from my neck down. My head was bleeding. Anyhow, I called my two sons. They came down. Of course, I was rushed to the hospital, but I suffered a spinal cord injury in that fall. And yeah, I then now I go to therapy every day, physical therapy, and I'm improving. I can now walk with a walker and the help of my therapist, which is wonderful. And my life has changed, but you know, um, it's really wonderful. I have a wonderful team of aides. They're like
Mhm.
family. And I work with a woman named Jen, who helps me in writing the book and other things that we're doing, like this podcast and so on. So I like have a second family, and each day is joyous, joyous. And yeah, I can't walk, but my happiness is not dependent upon walking. I still volunteer, and I just life is good because you're more than just your body, well, I believe your soul or spirit. And so the Karen that was walking before is the same Karen now. But the benefit is that I've also had time to take in all the good that's happened with Family Promise, because people used to say to me, aren't you amazed about what you did and so on. First of all, I don't think I did it. I believe that God's hand was in all of this. But now I can take in what Family Promise has meant to families as I talk to families on the phone. Like I just yesterday, I spoke to Natalie from Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, and she said, Family Promise changed my life. They were like a family to me, you know. And so she found not only shelter and meals, but people who really cared for her in the nurturing that she never had her whole life. So that's the funny thing about this. I created what I thought was a shelter program, but there's a whole nother aspect, which is people caring about people. And when we do that, you know, we heal. So it's been, you know, a wonderful journey.
Yeah. Oh, it's an amazing journey. And I think it's so inspirational that even going back to like you had a job that you were good
Mhm.
at, but you were still, whether it was compassion or passion, you were still brave enough to go beyond that and follow your passion
Mhm.
and change so many lives. And even after your accident, you're once again like able to rise above your accident and still find the joy in every day. And
Yes,
I think it just reminds me that like it's never too late. There's never a really good
true.
excuse. Like you,
Yeah, it's never too late.
yeah.
Never too late.
You can always find your passion and go after it.
Mhm.
Um, and I think nurturing other people and ourselves is such a huge part of that for sure.
Mhm. For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. Follow your passion, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's coming from your true self, and that you will go where you need to go. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And look at the millions of lives that you affected by doing that.
Yes. Thank you.
I do ask everybody on this podcast because it is called Nurture Herself. And I really, I feel like we have to take care of ourselves and then we can take care of everybody else around us. So
Mhm.
I wonder what is something that you do, to take care of yourself? How do you nurture yourself?
Well, I exercise every day.
Hmm.
You know, I walk with my walker. I do the standing frame. I have a bike that I ride, a stationary bike. And I also drink a lot of water. That
Hmm.
cleanses me. And I eat pretty much a vegetarian diet. I feel like I don't like heavy food or
Hmm.
meats and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's kind of how I nurture myself. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I spend time with my family and my grandchildren and my two sons. So yeah, that's how I nurture myself.
And all the
And
people
I'm
around
doing
you
my
that are like your family, right?
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Well, is there anything else that you would like to leave us with before we wrap this up?
Um, I don't know, just sometimes just medicate or don't medicate, meditate.
Meditate.
So you get in touch with you know, your real self, because there's a self inside us that goes beyond our bodies. So the more you get in touch with that, I think the happier you become.
Oh my
That's
God.
it.
But
That's all I
yeah,
have.
100%. I love that. That's a great way to end it.
Good.
Something that
Good.
I say all
Thank
the
you,
time.
Amanda.
Oh, thank you, Karen. This was such a
Enjoyed being with
pleasure.
you.
All right.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day. Thank you.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.